Seven Bridge Girl. A cold winter night, somewhere in Germany, a group of police officers came across a young woman wandering along a highway near a bridge. She walked aimlessly, lost in a deep state of confusion. She didn't speak, she didn't react. An alert for a missing person was issued immediately. At the station, one officer made an unsettling remark. This wasn't the first time she had been seen near that bridge. Was this simply a case of a lost girl? Or was there something else hiding beneath the surface? The officers tried to question her, asking her for her name, her home, anything that could help them identify her, but she didn't answer. No matter how many times they tried, nothing. Could she be deaf? Suffering from a medical condition? That seemed like the most logical explanation, at first. But just the day after her disappearance was announced, the police received a call that shattered their assumptions. Her parents had recognized her. They saw the posts, the photos, the descriptions. It was unmistakably their daughter. They rushed to the hospital in Bristol, where she had been taken for care, and once they saw her in person, they confirmed two crucial details. One, she wasn't deaf. She had no hearing impairments whatsoever. The reason she had remained silent was something much more complex. Two, she wasn't a teenager. Despite initial police estimates placing her between 14 and 18 years old, she was actually 22. The truth, she had been suffering from severe depression, a darkness so deep that it had silenced her completely. Now, on the surface, this might seem like nothing more than a tragic case of a young woman lost in her own thoughts, wandering aimlessly into the night. But I can't help wonder, why that bridge? Why was she seen there before? And why, after everything, did the full story never come to light? For reasons of privacy, the details remain undisclosed, but something about this case lingers in the air, a sense that we're only scratching the surface. So I ask you, what do you think really happened that night? This is just the tip of the iceberg. We will dive deep into the most disturbing occult and dark thing you have ever heard. 7 levels, 17 cases. Level 1. Paul Amadeus Demock. Have you ever heard of a premonition that made your blood run cold? In 1921, an Austrian-Swiss professor fell into a deep coma after contracting encephalitis lethargica. When he woke a year later, he moved to Greece, in his search for better living conditions in the little time he has left. There, he took a teaching position at the University of Athens, where he met a student named George Papashatsis. The two formed an unbreakable bond of trust, and on his deathbed, the professor entrusted Papashatsis with his personal diaries of 400 manuscripts with 200 pages each. The first 2 volumes detailed his life before the coma, but the true mystery lay within the volumes 3 and 4. According to these pages, the professor had lived an entire year in the body of another man, Andreas Northam, an Italian scientist confined to a hospital bed after a flying car accident in the year 3906. What he recorded wasn't just a dream or a delusion, it was a detailed account of the future, predicting events and advancements that would unfold long after his death. Among the most striking predictions were 2000 to 2300. Humanity would fall into crisis, plagued by overpopulation, severe environmental pollution, food shortages, economic collapse, and an endless cycle of local wars. While some of these issues were already present in 1921, the foresight that they would persist and escalate was unnervingly accurate. 2309. The world would reach a breaking point. Catastrophic natural disasters, compounded by war, would lead to a full-scale nuclear conflict, erasing vast portions of the human population. The survivors, displaced and desperate, would migrate en masse in search of habitable land. 2396. In the wake of devastation, a global parliament would be established, an unprecedented, unified government where every territory was represented, but the true power lay in the hands of the scientists. Money, as we know it, would become obsolete. Wealth would no longer be hoarded. Resources would be distributed equitably. Though some nations resisted this system, within 500 years, humanity fully adapted to it. 3400 to 4000. By this era, leadership shifted from scientists to the enlightened, individuals who mastered all fields of human knowledge. The barriers limiting human spiritual growth would dissolve. Work, as a concept, would change entirely. Every person would contribute to society between the ages of 19 and 21, after which they would be granted the status of citizen of humanity, ensuring all their essential needs were met for life. A world without money, a government ruled by knowledge, a society where labor is temporary and survival is guaranteed. Could this be our destiny, or was it nothing more than the fevered dream of a dying mind? Tell me, do you think this future is possible? Drop your own predictions in the comments. Billy Corgan, Shapeshifter. The Smashing Pumpkins are a well-known band that left a mark in the history of modern rock in the United States. But a story that not everyone might know is what happened to their lead vocalist, Billy Corgan. In an interview on the TV talk show The Howard Stern Show, the musician shared an incredibly strange encounter with a being of human-like appearance that transformed into a humanoid entity, unlike anything human.
I saw a transformation that I can't explain.
After hearing this, one of the people from the show's team asked him if he was under the influence of any drugs, considering his well-known history with substance use.
Were you on drugs?
I was not. I was totally sober.
To continue with the story, Corgan explained that he was doing something when, suddenly, he turned around and saw another person who he described as a kind of human. But all of a sudden, this person transformed into another being. As you can tell, the story lacks any real details, making it impossible to confirm its truth, and casting doubt on the mental well-being or honesty of the Smashing Pumpkins frontman. Anyway, sometime later and once again on the Howard Stern Show, Billy Corgan added to the story, saying that this being was naked in its human form.
The person was naked.
The host, Howard Stern, jokingly asked if it was a naked man with a prominent member. But Corgan said it wasn't a man or a woman, it was a being that was hard to explain. Could this encounter with an incomprehensible shapeshifter be true? Or was Corgan just having an astral trip due to illicit substances? It's something that will remain up to each person to decide. Karen Silkwood. On the night of November 13th, 1974, a car accident would be reported in the city of Oklahoma. But this wasn't just any regular accident, it was Karen Silkwood. Karen Silkwood was an American activist with a background in chemistry from Lamar State College of Technology in Boston, Texas. She began her career in 1964, but dropped out in 1965 and ran away with her partner, William Meadows, whom she would stay with until 1972, when their marriage fell apart. She then moved to Oklahoma. There, she worked as an administrative assistant at a hospital until Kerr-McGee Corporation hired her as a lab technician in the metallography department for their plutonium production plant at Cimarron River. During her time in this position, she joined the Oil, Chemical, and Atomic Workers Union, OCAW, and participated in various union activities, eventually being chosen as part of the union's negotiation committee. Silkwood would blow the whistle on the numerous sanitary and safety violations at the Kerr-McGee Corporation facilities, including defective suits and respirators, incorrect storage of materials, and the lack of showers for decontaminating employees, putting them in grave danger. She also noticed that plutonium rods and other radioactive materials were frequently missing, and when they were there, they were often stored incorrectly. To prove that the company's working conditions were truly dangerous, she went through radiation tests on November 5th. The results were disturbing. Her body contained over 400 times the human limit of plutonium-239, the main compound used in nuclear weapons. After this, Kerr-McGee Corporation gave her a break from work to decontaminate herself from radioactive substances. With all her evidence in hand, Silkwood set off to meet a reporter from the New York Times to reveal all her information to the public. But on her way to the meeting, she would suffer a fatal car accident, losing her life. The autopsy revealed that she had high levels of sedatives in her body. This raised the question, was it just a car accident? Or was it all part of a plan by Kerr-McGee Corporation's executives to prevent Silkwood from exposing the truth? Level 2. Margaret Thatcher Loch Ness Dolphin Hunt. The Loch Ness Monster is surely one of the most famous and ancient legends passed down through generations. There have been numerous reports of sightings and appearances, but its existence has never been confirmed. I mean, let's be real. Does it make sense to believe in a water monster that occasionally pops up on the shores of a lake in Scotland? But anyway, the debate about its existence isn't what I'm here to talk about today. Today, I'm going to tell you about the time Margaret Thatcher, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom from 1979 to 1990, proposed a mission to hunt down the Loch Ness Monster, using dolphins specially trained for the task. This promise was made during the 1979 elections, where Thatcher promised to import dolphins from the United States to the UK. Along with high-level, cutting-edge technology, they would train the dolphins for the sole purpose of finding the Loch Ness Monster. Is there any logic behind this absurd campaign? As crazy as it sounds, yes, there is. Those who pushed for this search argued that it would be hugely beneficial for tourism in the country if dolphins managed to capture the famous monster. Jerry Irwin. On February 28, 1959, Jerry Irwin, not to be confused with a crocodile hunter, was on his way to El Paso, Texas to return to his duties as a missile technician after enjoying a relaxing month-long vacation in Napa, Idaho. It was night and the road near Cedar City, Utah was calm, with little noise and illuminated by the moonlight and stars. Suddenly, the darkness was interrupted when Irwin saw a very bright flash in the sky, which lit up the entire landscape around him. Irwin also claims to have seen this white light moving, slowly descending toward the ground. At one point, this light disappeared behind a mountain range. Seeing this, Irwin stopped his car and got out, fully convinced that what he had seen was a plane that had crashed and was falling to the ground. So, he set out through the forest to help any potential survivors. Before leaving, he marked the word "stop" in bright ink on the side of the vehicle and left a note on his windshield that read, "Have gone to investigate possible plane crash. Please call law enforcement officers." Just 30 minutes later, a truck driver saw Irwin's car and alerted the local authorities. They searched the forest, found Irwin, but there was no trace of the plane. After several attempts to revive him, but with no response, Irwin was taken to the Cedar City Hospital. The doctors told him there had been no plane. Later, authorities asked him what had happened, and he told them that he didn't remember anything. Over time, Irwin continued experiencing memory problems and sudden blackouts. He was sent for further tests and placed under rest and observation due to his symptoms. Many theories circulate about what really happened to him. The main routes taken by conspiracy theorists are that he could have been a victim of an alien abduction and that the Flash was a UFO, or that he could have been subjected to government experimentations at the military base where he worked. The truth is really confusing, but this is just one of many fascinating stories about UFOs and aliens. Level 3. The Beloved Disciple, True Identity. One of the oldest books in human history and the most purchased book of all time worldwide is undoubtedly the Bible. And one of its greatest mysteries, discussed by the entire Christian community, as well as many theological and historical scholars, or simply by lovers of history and literature, is undoubtedly the secret behind the true identity of the beloved disciple of Jesus. This individual was one of Jesus' original disciples, who accompanied him on his travels and witnessed both his crucifixion, his empty tomb, and his resurrection. This disciple only appears in the New Testament in the Gospel of John and is not mentioned again except in John 21:24, which confirms that the Gospel of John is based on the testimony of the beloved disciple. There are many theories and theological studies about his true identity. Since the end of the 1st century, his identity has been mistakenly linked to John the Evangelist. Scholars have debated the authorship of these verses since at least the 3rd century, but more intensely since the Enlightenment. As previously mentioned, this disciple is only mentioned in the Gospel of John. In this Gospel, he is referred to several times. It is said that in the painting of the Last Supper, he is the person reclining to the right of Jesus, our left, the one to whom Jesus asks who will betray him and deliver him up, as noted in John 13:21-26. One of the most powerful studies is that of English theological scholar Hugh J. Schoenfield, who suggests that the beloved disciple was a temple priest who could not follow Jesus due to his duties in the temple. He used this to explain the lack of biblical information about Jesus' travel to the north in comparison to the vast amount of data about Jerusalem. Nina Kulagina. Thousands of stories about people with telekinetic and psychic powers are known today, ranging from scammers claiming to have real powers, like Uri Geller, to magicians who perform shows with tricks sometimes related to telekinesis, such as Chris Angel or the Masked Magician. But none of these stories are as genuine as that of Nina Kulagina. Who was this person? Nina Kulagina was a soldier in the Soviet Red Army who discovered that when she became angry, telekinetic powers were unleashed. It was as if she were 11 from Stranger Things. The first person to test her powers was the Soviet scientist Edward Naumov, who placed a matchbox inside a box in front of Nina Kulagina. Nina stared at the matchbox and it was thrown. Dr. Gennady Sergeyev made more than 60 recordings of Nina's powers to exhibit her supernatural abilities. Among these recordings were experiments conducted to test her powers, one of the most remarkable being when Nina Kulagina broke an egg, separating the yolk from the white, all while the egg was submerged in a large tank of water. After several experiments, the experts involved in the studies observed that Nina was suffering from various physical and mental stress issues. After several medical studies, she was diagnosed with numerous health problems, including symptoms of diabetes, endocrine issues, etc. The veracity of Nina Kulagina's powers was questioned by millions of people, considering that, during the 70s, the Soviet Union and the United States were in the middle of the Cold War, leading many in the West to view it as merely a spectacle aimed at intimidating the American government. Gabriela Rico Jimenez. In August 2009 in Monterrey, Mexico, a camera from a news station would capture a young woman named Gabriela Rico Jimenez in front of a luxurious hotel in the city, live on air. The girl was screaming uncontrollably, demanding her freedom and claiming that she had been held against her will. She also said that she had witnessed murders and acts of cannibalism. The people she pointed to as the responsible, or at least those who knew about what she had witnessed, were from the highest, most powerful elites, not just in Mexico, but some of them even had influence in the world. The main person she accused was Carlos Slim, a Mexican magnate and businessman who was the richest man in Mexico and, at one point, the richest man in the world. At the end of the news broadcast, you can see the police approach the young woman and take her away in custody. After this, Gabriela was taken to a police station and then locked up in a psychiatric center, where she received professional help. Sometime later, a testimony from someone who worked at the place where Gabriela was taken after her arrest would share what happened to him. I approached her and asked her some questions. Her name, if I knew where she lived. She told me that we were all dead, that we were among them, among other strange things that just left me paralyzed. After about 20 minutes of speaking with her, a couple of tall, suited men dragged the guy out of the room. Confused, he asked why this was happening. Thinking she was just someone with mental health issues saying nonsensical things, they told him not to get involved where he didn't belong and asked what she had told him. This testimony was the most chilling part of my investigation into the case. Could Gabriela have been right? And do powerful people really commit such atrocities? Or is she just a person suffering from mental health issues? James Tedford vanished. James Tedford was a U.S. war veteran from World War I, living in a quiet, small town in Vermont called Fletchertown, in Franklin County. There, he enjoyed his military retirement with his young wife, Vanessa Tedford, who was 28 years old, until, as history books tell us, World War II broke out, and he was called back to fight. His relationship with his wife remained the same as always, without any issues, but one day, when he returned home, he found his house empty. This didn't worry him at first. He thought, she went outside for a while, she'll be back. But the reality was very different. Vanessa didn't come back. Hours passed and she still hadn't appeared. Those who knew her said they saw her that day doing some shopping. Nobody noticed anything strange, and everyone confirmed she was acting normal. Her disappearance plunged James Tedford into a deep depression. He barely left his house, didn't talk to anyone, and if anyone saw him, they said he looked really bad. In 1947, he moved to a veteran's pension, where he didn't interact with nearly anyone and kept to his loneliness. He had very few close people, and those he did were living in St. Albans, Vermont, about an 8-hour bus ride away. One day, like any other in 1949, James took the bus to that city, but when he arrived, he didn't get off the bus because he wasn't there. Both the staff and passengers confirmed James had gotten on the bus, but he never got off. You might think he got off at a stop without telling anyone, right? but the vehicle never stopped, so it was like he just vanished. His belongings were still in the luggage compartment where all the bags were stored. In later years, similar disappearances would be reported in the same region. Could these inexplicable vanishings be related? I invite you to theorize in the comments box. Oh In-hai. Oh In-hai was a South Korean actress who later became a YouTuber, someone loved by many, yet sometimes controversial. On her channel, she mainly uploaded makeup content and vlogs about her daily life, sharing beauty tips and discussing other topics. Everything seemed normal until the shocking news broke. Oh In-hai was found lifeless in her apartment. When paramedics arrived after multiple emergency calls, they found her unresponsive and rushed her to the hospital. She was pronounced dead on the morning of September 14th. The forensic investigation concluded that In-hai had suffered cardiac failure following a suicide attempt. But then, the internet started to speculate that something was off about the whole situation. Her final uploaded video, titled In-hai's Nightly Routine, had a strange glitch around the 1:30 mark. At one point in this glitched section, a distorted voice, different from In-hai's, can be heard. According to translations from Korean citizens, the strange phrase being whispered is, "I'm going to die." The most unsettling part? The glitched footage consists of a frozen, looping clip that makes it look as if In-hai is repeatedly hitting her own neck with a comb. Was this some kind of premonition, or a mere editing error? Or was In-hai trying to send a message to her viewers before it was too late? Before we end this, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge how serious these topics are. If you're struggling, please reach out to friends, loved ones, but most importantly, mental health professionals who can help you. Mental health is essential, and life is beautiful. If you're suffering, please seek help. Level 4. Clifford Hoyt. Clifford Hoyt was an ordinary man like any other until 1999. At the age of 31, he was involved in a car accident that left him unconscious. When he regained consciousness, he told the nurses that he had been to hell. He described in vivid detail the anguish and the most horrifying tortures that took place there. Thinking he was delusional, they tried to calm him down and offered psychological help, but he rejected it. Several weeks later, his neighbors began complaining to the building owner about strange and creepy music coming from Clifford's apartment, playing until the late hours of the night. Due to the constant complaints, the building owner threatened to call the authorities. At one point, concerned about the state of the apartment, he decided to enter it and take photos. But what he saw was nothing short of strange. Fearing he'd find his property destroyed, what he found instead was Clifford lying on the floor, naked and surrounded by blocks of ice. Clifford claimed that the demons from hell, who still haunted him since his time there, were relentlessly burning his body. He said that the only way to keep them at bay was playing that eerie music around the clock. He also refused to leave his apartment, only venturing out for short periods to buy bare essentials to survive, including large blocks of ice. But why the ice? Well, he explained that it was to soothe the intense sensation of being burned alive while trying to sleep. Where's Clifford today? His whereabouts are currently unknown, but it's assumed that he remains confined in a mental hospital in Maryland, the place he was sent after the events we've just discussed. The doctors who treated and continue to treat Clifford today claim that all of this is due to brain damage caused by the accident, which induced him into a coma. But could it be that it's not just that, and he truly visited hell? Penn Station Sniper. Many crimes remain unsolved throughout history, and this case is one of them. In 1983, 50-year-old Emily Lucchesi was shot while lying on the street where she slept, as she was homeless, right in front of the Anthony Oliveri Women's Center on West 30th Street in Manhattan. She was there when suddenly a .25 caliber bullet came through an open window, striking her in the hip. That would be the first of 7 attacks that would take place around the Pennsylvania Station area. The investigators in the case questioned over 43,000 people and filled more than 3,000 files in an attempt to solve it. All the evidence pointed to the fact that the shooter was someone incredibly agile with exceptional skill at firing and climbing walls, balconies, and rooftops. Almost like they were some kind of real-life John Wick. This is a very difficult case, probably one of the toughest cases that the department has ever seen. This was said by Lieutenant John Carroll, who had handled countless cases of this nature in the past. It would be great to solve it. We're working as hard today as we did on day one. It's frustrating, but we're not going to give up. Carroll said this as well, although, ironically, his day one was actually the first day after what would be the last shot fired by the perpetrator they were chasing. A shot that fatally struck an Amtrak engineer in the head as he walked on the platform between tracks 20 and 21 at about 7 a.m. Robert Hornbeck. Robert Hornbeck was a 23-year-old soldier who one day simply disappeared. Hornbeck went missing in downtown Savannah during Easter weekend. There was no trace of his body until 2 weeks later he was found. His body wasn't lying in a trash bin, nor was it hidden anywhere that it could be linked to a military-related murder or abduction. Instead, his body was discovered in the ventilation ducts of the DeSoto Hilton Hotel. Upon hearing this news, a group of reporters from WTOC were granted access by the hotel owners to enter and report from the area where Robert Hornbeck's lifeless body was found. However, they weren't allowed to bring cameras, so the evidence remains in the written testimony of the reporters. Along with conclusions drawn by the police, they suggest that Hornbeck didn't end up there by chance, since it wasn't a public area. In other words, it wasn't a place he could have wandered into by accident. This raises the possibility that he was placed there, or even more disturbing, that someone left him there, dead. Without going into excessive and gruesome detail, Hornbeck had to pass through numerous sections and doors before reaching that exact spot where his body was found. One of, if not the most challenging parts of his journey was that after passing through the largest door, there was a strong and powerful air current that would make even the most daring mountain climbers used to harsh winds think twice about continuing. Wolves of Pavagada. In the small, isolated village of Pavagada, in the Karnataka region of South India, a series of disturbing murders took place, and the victims were children. In late April 1983, the disappearance of a 5-year-old girl was reported. It is said that she was abducted while sleeping beside her parents. This event sparked a series of kidnappings with almost identical characteristics. Quickly, the fear and concern of the villagers led to a police investigation. The officers found disturbing clues, such as dismembered body parts, pieces of blood-stained clothing, and some footprints. However, these didn't appear to be from shoes, but from animal tracks. This led the villagers to start hunting down every wolf and predator in the area. This put an end to the killings, at least for a while. Just 2 months later, another child went missing under conditions identical to the previous cases. Could the killer be back? In this second wave of killings, a group of tracker dogs followed the children's scent to a distant cave, but there was nothing there. The theories of animal abductions resurfaced, but when animal tracks were found near each crime scene, no evidence suggested that an animal had dragged the children. Other theories suggested that the children had been victims of attacks of ritualistic tantric magic. The wolf theory, though the most prominent, has a gap when we learn that practically all the victims, besides being children, were girls. Would a wolf specifically target only girls? Or was this all a human crime, with the animal tracks planted to mislead investigators? Even more than 40 years later, the people of Pavagada still ask themselves, who or what was the killer of those girls in 1984? Were the attacks animal-related, with the gender of the victims being a coincidence?